Hello everyone, Exilium here with Girls Frontline 2 coming out. I'm going to start kind of going over the characters here. I'm going to try and push these out as fast as I can. I was a little too slow to react on Ash Echoes. And so over Thanksgiving weekend, I'm just starting to record these. I'm going to just try and go back to back to back. Now, at this game, I don't have access to a test server. I didn't get into beta, so I haven't actually been able to play the game in any capacity. It's mostly just been watching videos on the units. So currently, I'm just going to kind of be going over the kits and talking about what I think they'll work well with, but since I don't have any actual experience, I'll have to do follow-up videos as I get these units in the game to kind of go over them with in-game footage. Now with Qiongjiu, she is the standard unit that I do plan to target in this game. Now I'm not going to be re-rolling or anything in this game. It's not going to be necessary. You will get a selector, and from what I read, every 260 pulls. She will be the unit I will be going for on the standard selector. And so I will for sure have her after so many pulls. And then eventually when I have all of the standard units, she's going to be the one that I will eventually go for getting duplicates of, and we'll kind of see why here in a second. All right, so the first thing we'll want to take a look at with her is going to be her passive skill, or this is basically like the trait if you compare it to Sword of Convallaria, Steady Plan here. And so at the beginning of it, she gains 1 point of Confectance Index each time after dealing damage. And how Confectance Index kind of works, it's similar to the skill points in Sword of Convallaria in that some skills requires you to have so many of these to be able to use the skill. And some of them have cooldowns, like the active skill up here, Guide to Victory, has a cooldown of 1. So you just need to have that cooldown be done to be able to use it. But then some other skills, like in her case, the ultimate skill requires 3. Then it will require 3 of these points to activate that skill. So it's just going to depend on the skills, and this is going to be different amongst all the characters. And so just know when she triggers this passive, she's going to get 1 point of that per turn. And so you have that. After she deals damage, she gets 1 point, and then increases damage dealt to targets not under protection of cover by 10%. So just by a passive, if they're not under cover, she just automatically does an extra 10% of damage. And then when an enemy unit within range receives targeted damage from an ally, so if any of your allies do damages within her range, she performs 1 instance of action support. What action support is her dealing physical damage equal to 90% of the attack and 2 points of stability damage. What stability damage is if they are undercover or protection, they have like an extra defensive target. It's almost like a shield on them. And when you're dealing damage, stability damage, if you knock that all the way to 0, they lose a significant chunk of that damage reduction they get from being undercover. And so it does 2 points of damage to that. And this can be triggered up to 3 times per turn. And this is a big reason that I want to get her. And so one thing that this game does not have, comparing it to like an XCOM game, is they do not have Overwatch, where instead of attacking with your character, you can instead put them on Overwatch. So if a target moves within their range, they'll shoot at them and do and you can do a big damage to them when they're not undercover. You have a similar thing that you can do with this one, in that it's kind of like an Overwatch, in that if any of your teammates do damage to the enemies, then she can react and do damage herself. And when you kind of look at synergies with some of the other characters that I've been reading on, so like we have one, there's other characters that have reactions where they can do damage to enemies, and so they can do multiple attack hits. And so if you have that, then you can pair it with her. She's going to act every time they act doing damage, and it's just going to add a lot of damage per turn. And so this is a key part of her kit, because this is where she's going to do the most amount of damage. And then when you look down here at the bottom here, so on this passive skill, fortification segments 3 and 6, what these basically are your dupes. So you have fortification segment 1 through 6. So each dupe you get will add buffs to your skills. And so these ones require you to get the 3rd dupe and the 6th dupe to get these buffs. Now, she is a standard unit. And one thing is, she is what I would consider probably the best one, and I think CN considers it the best as well, is since you're going to be able to get a selector every 260 pulls, plus potentially other selectors in other cases, once you have unlocked every standard unit, she's the one that I'm going to actually be pumping up the dupes into when I get the selectors. So I think for her, these are going to be very important for her kit. I will go over them for all the units, but she's going to be the main one that I'll probably be getting dupes for compared to others, unless I lose 50-50s and I get dupes on them. So we'll kind of look at all of them. So with this skill on Steady Plan, after the 3rd dupe, after action support, apply Overburn to the target for 2 turns. Action support's damage increases by 10%. This one is going to be big. we'll kind of see why in a second, but that's going to deal with Guide to Victory up here, because having Overburn on them will make them automatically critical hit. With the Fortification segment 2 here, if they're already inflicted with Overburn, increases the critical hit of this attack by 100%. So you're going to have this one after you get the third one. So you're guaranteed to crit on this skill after your passive is activated. So that's huge on her there. Then you have Fortification segment 6. This one increases the damage by 10% against targets without cover protection. And so this is just a straight damage increase to people that are not under cover. And like I said, one of her big synergies is she acts kind of like an Overwatch unit, in that when enemies are moving, you have other teammates within your team that have their own reaction skills, and when they react and attack them, she'll also follow up with an attack, and they can generally be put in situations where they're no longer under cover, and so that can be increased damage there. And then from there, we'll go ahead and move up to her basic attack up the top. So this is just going to be your basic attack that you do up here. Has a range of 8. This one you can do every turn. It does not have a cooldown on her. This is just a target attack. It does not do AoE. It does do 2 damage of stability damage, so knocking down basically their shields when they're under cover. So this should just select one enemy target within 8 tiles and deals physical damage equal to 80% of her attack to them. So nothing crazy with that. None of the dupes will upgrade the skill. It's just your basic attack. If you can't do anything else, this is the attack you're going to do. Now with her, I don't think you're really going to be doing this very often, because you have multiple other ways and avenues to attack, especially since her 2 other active skills only have a cooldown of 1. So likely you're not going to be using the skill very often. Now I haven't played the game, so I don't know 100% on that yet, but that's just her basic there. So then we have her next active skill over here, Shared Trajectory. It's a targeted buff, medium ammo, and it's a burn type. Now there are elements in this game, and she's kind of part of that fire type, where she's going to be doing burn damage. And so this one has a range of 8. It's a target, so single target attack. It does stability damage of 3 to the units or the enemy, and it has a cooldown of 1, meaning she can do this every other turn. And so this one, she selects one enemy target within 8 tiles. She'll deal burn damage equal to 150% of attack to them, and then she will gain support boost 1. Support boost 1 increases the damage dealt with action support by 15%. And remember, action support is in her passive, and so it just makes it her passive does an extra 15% of damage. And that exposed units is increased by 10% and activates 1 time. This buff cannot be cleansed, so she's guaranteed to keep this. And so this is one you're going to, when you're setting up, you're going to want to target this skill when you know that you're going to be able to trigger this on multiple enemies, because it's just going to be a flat 15% increase to damage with her passive there. So this one you're going to pretty much activate every other turn, unless there's a reason to hold on to it because you're not in a position to do your damage there, and instead you want to wait a turn and wait for the enemies to be in a better position to use it. So we have that one. Then this one has your first dupe buff, Fortification Segment 1. So this one gets buffed first with your first dupe. If a kill is scored, increases the damage bonus of Support Boost 1 to 30%. So if you kill with your action support, now it's going to go up to 30%. And so that's just another one. So now that's just adding up into her damage there. So that's pretty big. And it just makes it where her follow-up attacks just doing significant amount more damage right there. And that's going to be the easiest dupe to get of the group. And so the next one here will be Guide to Victory. And so this one is a range of 1, cooldown 1, but it has an AoE range of 8, stability damage 3. So you're going to select a target direction and inflict 110% attack powers and AoE burn damage to the first enemy target within 8 grids, and applying Overburn for 2 turns. And what Overburn does is, upon gaining this effect at the end of the action, the unit and allies within 1 tile radius received a fixed damage equal to 10% of the inflictor's attack. This is considered a burn debuff. So this is a single target attack on that initial hit, but then it's going to do a 1 tile radius around AoE Overburn attack that hits all of them. And this will last for 2 turns. Now with this one has that second fortification segment. So for the second dupe, if the target is already inflicted with Overburn, increases the critical rate of this attack by 100%. So if you have something to get this cooldown so you can do it again, or they have Overburn from another target, you are guaranteed to crit with this 110% attack on that unit. And we already know with the third dupe here that it applies Overburn when she attacks them. So when you're getting dupes, it's this second one really wants that third one so that you can get overburned from her passive, so that this one can pretty much always be a crit. And so that's where these dupes are going to get really good for her. Like the third one is huge for her because you're basically making this an always crit attack when set up correctly. So Guide to Victory, really good there. And it does have a little bit of AoE, but the main thing of focus of her is her single target damage. And so the next skill we'll look at here is her ultimate skill, Pressing the Momentum. This one is a buff to herself. It costs 3 of that confectance of hers. She targets herself. It does no stability damage because it's basically a buff to herself. What this does is it gives her 3 stacks of action support 2, and then at max confectance index gains an additional stack and increases the maximum number of action supports this turn by 1. And if you remember that action support triggers 3 per turn, that'll just basically bring it up to where she can do it now 4 times per turn. And with that support boost too, what it's basically doing is increasing the damage dealt with action support by 30%, and damage against exposed units, so someone that's not under cover, is increased by an additional 10%, and this activates 1 time, and this cannot be cleansed. And then when we look at the ultimate, as you start getting your dupes some more, on the 4th and 5th dupe, so for the 4th one, applies a vulnerable 1 to targets that are not protected by cover for 1 turn. So vulnerable, just like in sort of Convoy, it's going to make them take additional damage from all other targets. So that'll be really good, especially when you're doing bosses, if you get that 4th dupe. Now this is 4 dupes deep, so it'll be a while till you get this, but like I said, this is going to be the standard unit that I'm going to be targeting my dupes for down the line. And so I expect to eventually get this one, and so that'll be really nice for her. And then the 5th one here, when performing action support, applies damage up to self and the allied unit that caused her to trigger it for 1 turn before the aforementioned ally unit makes their attack. And so it's going to give these buffs before your ally attacks, and then your ally is going to attack, and then you're going to do your follow-up attack. So big damage there in that 5th one. And so you can kind of see why the dupes are really good on her. So that is her ultimate, and that is her entire kit right there. Now there is down here the neural helix here. So this is like an upgrade system that you'll have access to as you get higher in levels. So these will be things you're kind of grinding out within the game to kind of increase the capabilities or skills up there. So we'll kind of just go through all of these, and I'll have to do a more detailed guide on these once I've access to the game and can kind of show it and explain how it works. But it's going to be basically like most upgrade systems in a gacha. So we'll just go through each one of these here. This first one here, concentration, gains 3 points of confectance index at the start of battle. So that basically allows her to immediately use her ultimate in the beginning. So efficient planning, a buff for support action, cleanse 1 buff from the target. A nice little thing to remove a buff, so if they have like a defense reduction, boom, or defense damage reduction, you can remove that. Targeted training, while in support mode, applies defense down 2 to the target 1 turn before your allied unit attack. So a way to get defense down on them before your ally themselves attacks, and then she's going to follow up an attack on them. So that's a way to debuff them. Point of vulnerability, modify the effect of the active skill Guide to Victory, so that it damages all enemies within those 8 tiles. So if you remember this one, it was the first enemy it hit within those 8 grids. After that, it stopped and then applied that overburn. This one makes it impact all enemies within those 8 tiles. And then each additional enemy after it does a 30% less damage. So all the enemies behind that first one are going to take 70% damage. Still a nice little AoE attack, even though she's mostly a single target. It is a way to hit more than 1 unit with her. The next one, unnecessary adjustments. When a phase weakness is exploited using the active skill Common Rail, the user gains Blazing Assault for 2 turns. Don't necessarily know everything with this, but it seems like when you're exploiting the weakness within her attack and Common Rail, so not 100% sure on what that means with it, but it does give them a buff of Blazing Assault too. I'm assuming this is an additional damage of some sort, or maybe something like that. So that lasts for 2 turns, so just a nice little buff that she can get from there. And then Steadiness, when under the effect of support boost, gain immunity to displacement effects applied by enemy units, so they can't displace her when she's under this support boost from her active skill shared directly up here. So that's a nice little buff you got there. Now these are all things that you can grind. These aren't dupe related, so you should be able to eventually get these from what I understand. So that's just a little buff there. And then another part a little here, shared as strategic negotiations increases the damage dealt outside of the unit's own turn by 7%. So just a 7% damage increase basically for her action support attack here. And so that is pretty much everything with her. And so we can kind of see how useful she is. She is the top tier single target damage dealer. And if you actually look at Pridewind's review here, you can kind of see what they say on the pro side of things. Top tier single target damage, provides a steady amount of DPS because she's constantly being able to attack as your other allies are attacking. And then her action support has low cooldowns, basically because you can use it 3 times per turn. So she can constantly provide indirect damage to others' actions. Now, that does have the con of not beginner friendly, requires an understanding of combat mechanics. To me, if you're getting into this game, you've probably played an XCOM before, which I have as well. She works like Overwatch in a lot of them, in that you're wanting to position your units in a way so the enemy's exposed when she's triggering her action support. So if you're familiar with XCOM, that's not really a con. You're going to understand that. Now, if someone's just coming straight into this and hasn't played an XCOM game, that might take a little bit to learn, but really not going to be a big con for most. Requires level 30 plus to become stronger, is its strongest neural helix. So those are those little buffs we talked about here right before it, are locked behind the higher levels. So you're not going to have all those extra buffs until you get to the max levels. I ain't worried about that. If she's not the top tier unit for the very, very beginning, that doesn't matter, because the beginning game content is generally easy enough in these games that you don't have to have the meta for the early game. You want the meta for the late game. And so not too big of a deal there if she's not the best of the best at the very beginning, because she will become the best of the best later down. And then heavily dupe reliant, as her best potential is locked behind her fortification segments. Like I said, she is going to be the standard unit that I go for dupes for after I get all the other standard units. And you will get selectors every 260 pulls. This is not something where you're not going to be able to get multiple selectors. Like a lot of other gotchas, you'll get like 1 selector a year. You're going to get multiple, and you'll eventually be able to actually max out these segments if she's going to be like the main standard that you want to invest dupes into. And so that's pretty much what they have there. But absolutely great unit. Will be the main target, like I've said. And then when I'll actually go another video when I show her in game when I eventually get her. Hopefully I get her. Hopefully she's the one I get my first pulls. We don't know. I don't know what's going to happen on that. Now I do know the first character coming out on release is going to be this unit Suami right here. She's going to be the next unit I'll probably go over after I get through the standards right before the game releases. And she is going to be a unit that I will be pulling because she's an amazing support. And if I lose the 50-50, I can hope that I get Qiongjiu. So we'll kind of see from there. But yeah, to kind of wrap things up here, if you like my content and you're going to play Girls Frontline too, just leave me a like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. And thanks for watching.